Now, you'll know, of course, the issue of fairness in women's sport became an election issue thanks to Katherine Deves courageously standing up for her convictions, running for the Liberals in the seat of Warringah. It's about protecting girls and women from having to line up against biological males in sport or perhaps share their facilities. That's the issue. It's as simple as that. It's not an anti-trans push. It's pro-women and girls. We've got nothing against trans people here on this program. As you know, we've had trans people as regular and highly regarded guests on the program. Deves was unfairly attacked and bullied by her critics who dismissed her concerns. Nothing to see here, they said. Well, now the issue is coming to a head after transgender swimmer Lia Thomas said she hopes to compete at the US Olympic trials in 2024. Have a look.
Trans women are not a threat to women's sports. Don't need anybody's permission to be myself and to do the sport that I love. It's been a goal of mine to swim at Olympic trials for a very long time, and I would love to see that through.
Yeah, so this news that Thomas is looking at trialling for the 2024 Olympics has prompted Aussie champion Ariarne Titmus to speak out, calling on swimming's governing body to take fairness into account. We want everyone to enjoy swimming in the fairest way possible, and I hope that they take that into account, she said. Surely that's fair enough. Thomas wasn't anywhere near the top swimming as a male, but she's a national champion as a woman. That means other women have been pushed back unfairly. And there have been plenty of other examples. Transgender weightlifter Laurel Hubbard was knocked out of the Tokyo Olympics after failing to complete her lifts. Last month, transgender surfer Sasha Jane Lowerson won the longboard championship in Western Australia. The 44-year-old was crowned the men's champion just 3 years ago in 2019, competing as Ryan Egan. And late last year, transgender skateboarder Lillian Gallagher took home the top prize at a Red Bull skating competition. Let's bring in Katherine Deves, who joins me in the studio. Katherine, thanks for joining us. So often people describe this, especially when they're attacking your candidacy, as a fringe issue. It doesn't matter. It's not happening anywhere. But these examples keep bobbing up. No one wants to stop transgender people from competing in sport. But surely women and girls are being unfairly disadvantaged.
That's right, Chris. So good evening. Thanks for having me on the show. It's wonderful to see these young women who are going to be impacted by these inclusion policies standing up and speaking for themselves. During the election, even Dawn Fraser stood up and said that this is an issue of unfairness. And what we have here is a collision of rights. It is competing human rights between biological females and males who are claiming a trans identity. And it comes down to a question of equality and fairness and common sense. And we need to be able to debate this, taking into consideration the fact that women's sport exists for a reason, and that is to ensure fair competition and player safety for women and girls. Well,
that's the first point where I think there's got to be wholehearted agreement with you. You've got to be able to debate this. You can't solve an issue like this without debating it. Yet, as we've seen with you, you raise your head above the pulpit as all sorts of criticism. You apologise for some of the things you said, but a lot of it was reported deceptively. SBS has had to apologise to you for a very common misinterpretation of what you were saying. But the thing is then, this has to be resolved before the Olympics, doesn't it? We can't have Lia Thomas competing against other women.
Well, there's a number of bodies like the IOC, the AHRC in Sport Australia here, the NCAA in America, who have abnegated their responsibilities to women and girls. They are prioritising inclusion. They are overlooking the fact the purpose of women's sports is to exclude those who have an inherent biological advantage because they have a male physiology. And if we don't exclude those people, it will mean that women and girls do not have a chance to shine.
Now, the point here too is that one of the most prominent transgender people in the world, who also happens to be an Olympic gold medalist as a male, is Caitlyn Jenner. And she's spoken out on this issue, and she says quite clearly that trans women have a competitive advantage. Have a look.
I've been through the process. I can still, 7 years later, still hit the ball 280, 290 yards in playing golf. I've got a lot left over, and I think Lia Thomas obviously has a lot left over.
Caitlyn Jenner says that Lia Thomas has an advantage. Now, I hardly think Caitlyn Jenner is transphobic or anti-trans.
That's correct. I mean, there's a number of high-profile trans women who've come out against the inclusion of males with trans identity in sport. I absolutely agree with Caitlyn Jenner, and I think that when we are seeing legislators here in Australia stick their heads in the sand and say that there is not an issue here, if you disagree with me, you're a bigot, or if parents raise concerns, they're transphobes. I mean, that absolutely debases what is normal democratic process, which is when we have these conversations and we look to balance the competing rights. And as we've seen, women and girls have been very much excluded from these conversations, whether it's the IOC or Sport Australia, and I'm really pleased to see these young Olympians standing up for themselves.
How well do you know Scott Morrison?
Oh, look, I've spoken with Scott during the course of the election.
You didn't know him before that?
I did not.
Because I keep reading, especially in the old Fairfax newspapers, there's this conspiracy theory that you were put up as a candidate to deliberately inflame this issue. Yet my experience was I couldn't get to speak to you. The Liberal Party was trying to stop you creating a distraction, yet somehow this conspiracy theory has come up that Scott Morrison deliberately put you up there to raise these issues. Tell us what you think of that theory.
When I was selected as, the so-called captain's pick, there were 9 candidates who were selected, 8 of which were women. And I genuinely believe Mr Morrison wanted to put more women up as candidates. The issue arose where there was a firestorm around things that I'd said previously online. I don't think anyone actually expected that. And, I was an ordinary
So that's
candidate.
when they tried to shut you up because they didn't want you being a distraction. Did they actually at any time try and get you to do more media?
Oh, look, you're allowed to do local media as a candidate, but when it comes to going into the national press, the headquarters, we have a national narrative that everyone has to stick to, the issues around economic policy, national security, things like that. However, I was a candidate where I'd risen to national prominence, and I think it took everyone by surprise, and we very much tried to deal with that. But with respect to the issues that I was prosecuting, I think that the media had a lot to answer for. There were certain elements of the media who really whipped it up into a frenzy, decontextualised certain things, and made the whole issue a lot worse than what it needed to be.
Yeah, it was your opponents who got all the attention your way, not yourself. Just very briefly before, are you going to run again? You're going to try and run in Warringah next time?
I intend to stay involved with the Liberal Party, and I'll just see where that takes me.
Great. Thanks for joining us, Katherine. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Katherine Deves there. You might not have heard the last from her.